Welcome to Present Poetry. I'm your host, Erin Crittenden, and all poems within this podcast are either public domain or used with permission from the author or the author's estate. It's a fun time for poetry lovers of all ages, so sit back, relax, and get ready to hear some poems of the past and the present. This week's featured poet is Thomas Hardy. Thomas Hardy was born June 2nd, 1840, in Higher Brockhampton, Dorset, England. His mother, Jemima, taught Hardy until he was 8, when he then began attending Mr. Last's Academy for Young Gentlemen in Dorchester. While there, he demonstrated great academic potential, but unfortunately his family didn't have the means for higher education, so Hardy left school at 16 and became apprenticed to a local architect. In 1862, Thomas Hardy moved to London and enrolled at the King's College London. He also won prizes from the Royal Institute of British Architects and the Architectural Association. He joined Arthur Blomfield's practice as an assistant architect in April 1862 and worked there for several years before retiring to Dorchester and devoting his life to writing. In 1870, he met and fell in love with Emma Gifford, who he married in 1874. Unfortunately, they became estranged later in their marriage, and her death in 1912 had a traumatic effect on him. In 1898, Hardy published his first volume of poetry, Wessex Poems, a collection of poems he had written over 30 years. While some suggest that Hardy gave up writing novels following the harsh criticism of Jude the Obscure in 1896, it was never verified. Hardy then published Poems of the Past and Present in 1901, which contains The Darkling Thrush, originally titled The Century's End, one of his best-known poems about the turn of the century. However, some of Hardy's more famous works are from Poems 1912-13, a collection of poems he wrote following the death of his wife Emma in 1912. They had been estranged for 20 years at that point, and these lyric poems express a deeply felt regret and remorse on his end. In 1910, Hardy had been appointed a member of the Order of Merit and was also, for the first time, nominated for the Nobel Prize in Literature. He was nominated again for the prize 11 years later and received a total of 25 nominations until 1927, but he never won the award. In 1914, Hardy was one of 53 leading British authors, including H.G. Wells, Rudyard Kipling, and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who signed their names to the Author's Declaration justifying Britain's involvement in the First World War. Thomas Hardy became ill with pleurisy in December 1927 and died at Mexgate just after 9 p.m. on January 11, 1928. He was 88 years old. His funeral was on January 16th at Westminster Abbey, and it proved a controversial occasion because Hardy had wished for his body to be interred at Stinsford in the same grave as his first wife Emma. His family and friends concurred, however his executor, Sir Sidney Carlisle Cockerell, insisted that he be placed in the Abbey's famous Poets' Corner. A compromise was reached whereby his heart was buried at Stinsford with Emma, and his ashes remain in the Abbey at Poets' Corner. Although his poems were initially not as well received as his novels had been, Thomas Hardy is now recognized as one of the great poets of the 20th century, and his verse had a profound influence on later writers, including Robert Frost, W.H. Auden, Dylan Thomas, and Philip Larkin. We are reading from Satires of Circumstance, Lyrics, and Reveries, a collection originally published in 1914. This poem is called A Thunderstorm in Town. She wore a new terracotta dress, and we stayed, because of the pelting storm, within the hansom's dry recess. Though the horse had stopped, yea, motionless, we sat on, snug and warm. Then the downpour ceased, to my sharp, sad pain, and the glass that had screened our forms before flew up, and out she sprang to her door. I should have kissed her if the rain had lasted a minute more. This poem is called My Spirit Will Not Haunt the Mound. My spirit will not haunt the mound above my breast, but travel, memory possessed, to where my tremulous being found life largest, best. My phantom-footed shape will go, where nightfall grays, hither and thither along the ways I and another used to know in backward days. And there you'll find me, if a jot you still should care for me and for my curious air. If otherwise, then I shall not for you be there. This poem is called Where the Picnic Was. Where we made the fire in the summertime, of branch and briar, on the hill to the sea, I slowly climb through winter mire and scan and trace the forsaken place quite readily. Now a cold wind blows and the grass is gray, but the spot still shows a burnt circle, and stick ends, charred, still strew the sward, whereon I stand, last relic of the band who came that day. Yes, I am here, just as last year, and the sea breathes brine from its strange straight line, up hither, the same as when we four came. But two have wandered far from this grassy rise into urban roar where no picnics are, and one has shut her eyes for evermore. This poem is called In Church. And now to God the Father he ends, and his voice thrills up to the topmost tiles. Each listener chokes as he bows and bends, and emotion pervades the crowded aisles. Then the preacher glides to the vestry door, and shuts it, and thinks he has seen no more. The door swings softly ajar meanwhile, and a pupil of his in the Bible class, who adores him as one without gloss or guile, sees her idol stand with a satisfied smile, and reenact at the vestry glass each pulpit gesture in deaf-dumb show that had moved the congregation so. This poem is called The Year's Awakening. How do you know that the pilgrim track along the belting zodiac, swept by the sun in his seeming rounds, is traced by now to the fish's bounds, and into the ram when weeks of cloud have wrapped the sky in a clammy shroud, and never as yet a tinct of spring has shone in the earth's appareling? O vespering bird, how do you know? How do you know? How do you know, deep underground, hid in your bed from sight and sound, without a turn in temperature, with weather life can scarce endure, that light has won a fraction's strength, and day put on some moments' length, whereof in merest rote will come, weeks hence, mild airs that do not numb? O crocus root, how do you know? How do you know? This poem is called A Poet. Attentive eyes, fantastic heed, assessing minds he does not need, nor urgent writs to sup or dine, nor pledges in the roseate wine. For loud acclaim he does not care, by the august or the rich or fair, nor for smart pilgrims from afar, curious on where his hauntings are. But sooner or later, when you hear that he has doffed this wrinkled gear, some evening at the first star ray, come to his graveside, pause and say, whatever the message his to tell, two bright-souled women loved him well. Stand and say that amid the dim, it will be praise enough for him. Thank you for listening to this episode of Present Poetry. If you enjoyed it, please leave us a review, share us on social media, or subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you would like to learn more about the featured poet, or you would like your work featured on the podcast, please check out the links in the show notes. Thank you again for listening, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.